Kenard is one of the smallest characters in The Wire, and his story carries one of the show's largest warnings. He enters as a child playing Omar in the street. He leaves in handcuffs after killing the man he once pretended to be. The distance between those moments explains who Kenard is, what Baltimore taught him, and why the system only notices him once the damage is complete. If you enjoy essays about The Wire and the characters whose smallest scenes change the meaning of the whole series, subscribe. There are many more stories like this hidden around Baltimore. Kenard is a child working in the West Baltimore drug trade. He is younger and smaller than Namond, Michael, Randy, and Dookie. The show never gives us his family, his home, his classroom, or a private conversation with an adult who cares about him. We learn him entirely through public behavior. He appears on corners, in alleys, and around other boys. He sells drugs, insults people, steals a package, survives beatings, and keeps testing anyone who seems weaker than the reputation attached to them. That limited view is important. The Wire gives Wallace a home full of children, Randy a foster mother, Michael a younger brother, Dookie a neglected family, and Namon two parents whose ideas about him pull in opposite directions. Kenard receives none of that interior life. The city meets him in the same way the audience does, as a little body already moving through the street economy. By the time anyone learns his name, most of the formation has already happened somewhere beyond the frame. It would be easy to call him evil and leave the analysis there. His behavior gives us plenty of evidence for cruelty. He tries to burn a cat. He enjoys humiliating boys who struggle to defend themselves. He shoots Omar in the head without any confirmed order or immediate need. The show also keeps reminding us of his size, his age, and the adults who built the world around him. Kenard is responsible for what he does. He is also a child whose available education has been organized around fear. His first appearance comes in Season 3, before anyone calls him Kenard. Omar's crew attacks a Barksdale stash house. The robbery turns into a gunfight, and Tosha is killed by a stray shot from her own side. Police arrive after the drugs, shooters, and surviving robbers have gone. The blood remains. Children gather around the site and rebuild the entire event as a game. One boy wants the coat because it is his turn to be Omar. That boy is Kenard. The moment lasts only a few seconds. It still contains the beginning of his education. He knows the role that matters. Nobody wants to play Tosha. Nobody argues over who gets to be the terrified dealer inside the stash house. The children preserve Omar's coat, weapon, authority, and victory. Violence has already been edited into a form they can enjoy. Kenard encounters Omar as a neighborhood character before he encounters him as a person. The name arrives through stories. The long coat becomes a costume. The shotgun becomes a stick. Omar has private rules governing who he robs and who he tries to protect, and those rules do not travel as easily as the image. A child watching from the sidewalk sees an armed man who frightens older armed men and takes what he wants. David Simon later explained that the writers planted Kenard there as the possible beginning of Omar's eventual death. The plan depended on whether the young actor could continue in the role. He could, so a child's game became a 5-season consequence. The choice says something larger than clever foreshadowing. Violence placed into a neighborhood returns through the people who grow up watching it. Bunk recognizes that consequence during his confrontation with Omar a few episodes later. He remembers a rougher version of their old neighborhood, full of hard men who still told certain children to go home. Bunk wanted to enter their parties and prove himself, and those men sent him away because they knew he did not belong there. He only understands years later that they were protecting him. After visiting Tosha's family, Bunk tells Omar that every death ripples outward. He describes seeing children act like Omar, call him by name and glorify him. Makes me sick, motherfucker. How far we done fell. Kenard is standing inside that fall. The older neighborhood Bunk describes had people willing to close the door on a schoolboy. The neighborhood Kenard inherits turns the corner into a workplace for children. Adult dealers need lookouts, runners, and young bodies who attract less police attention. Adult stick-up men become legends. Police chase the children when statistics require arrests and wave them away when juvenile booking requires too much time. Almost every authority around Kenard gives him a reason to remain close to the game. Omar looks unsettled by Bunk's accusation because his code has no answer for imitation. His targets remain under his control. A boy watching him decides which parts of the performance survive. The gun, coat, and fear are easy to copy. Restraint requires a much longer explanation, usually delivered by an adult who plans to stay around. When Kenard returns as a recognizable character in Season 4, he is already working near Naman's corner. He and Naman watch a street enforcer brutalize Bubbles while searching him for money, and Kenard responds with excitement. The scene barely focuses on him. That is how the show uses Kenard for most of his life. He sits near the edge, absorbing another example of power expressing itself through physical control. Naaman becomes his first boss in the story. That arrangement sounds almost ridiculous when stated plainly. Weebei's middle school son employs a smaller child to help sell narcotics. Naaman barely knows how to run the corner himself. He has the clothes, the family name, and a rehearsed version of his father's confidence. Kenard works beneath an imitation of a Barksdale soldier while carrying an imitation of Omar inside his imagination. The entire structure is made of children performing adults. Kenard quickly sees that Naaman's authority is fragile. Naaman talks constantly, threatens people, and enjoys presenting himself as a boss. He hesitates when consequences become physical. Kenard's talent is noticing that hesitation earlier than everyone else. Police give us another key part of Kenard's development during a sweep. Officers run onto a football field and grab him. He curses, struggles, and insists he is not afraid. One officer asks what they should do with him. Carver looks at Kenard and says he is not even bait. They release him because processing a child that young would require half the shift at juvenile booking. The decision makes practical sense inside a department with limited time and larger targets. It also teaches Kenard exactly where he stands. He is old enough to work a drug corner and young enough to fall beneath the amount of paperwork the police are willing to complete. The system has physical custody of him for a moment. Nobody asks why a child his size is there, who sent him, whether he is safe or what happens when he goes home. The only question is whether the arrest is worth the officer's time. Kenard hears himself described as too small to matter and walks with shouting at police. His size becomes a kind of protection. Adults underestimate him. Officers release him. Older boys treat him as a minor problem until he pushes too far. Omar eventually looks directly at him and turns away. Kenard learns that being dismissed gives him room to act. The package theft shows how much he has already learned. Naaman trusts Kenard with a drug stash stored in Kenard's basement. Kenard steals it and claims police kicked in the door. The lie is simple because it uses an event everyone on the corner already understands. Police raids happen. Packages disappear. Nobody expects a child to provide documentation. Naaman accepts the explanation because accepting it protects him from a confrontation. Michael asks the obvious questions. If police broke into the basement, where are the damaged hinges? Why was nobody arrested? Michael reads the physical world while Naaman tries to live inside words. Once Naaman checks the door, he knows Kenard lied. Delonda tells him that Kenard has to feel some pain. Michael says Naaman needs to put something real behind what he says. Every person advising Naaman reaches the same conclusion. The theft will be resolved through violence. No one considers taking the drugs away from all of these children. No adult asks why Kenard has a package in his basement, or why Naaman has authority over him. The only debate concerns which child is willing to hurt the other one. Naaman confronts Kenard and demands the stash. Kenard watches him struggle to complete a threat. "I'm about to," Naaman says. Kenard throws the unfinished language back at him. "About to?" That response reveals Kenard more clearly than a long speech could. Status alone carries little authority with him. Weebei's name, Naaman's clothes, and the title of boss mean very little once the person carrying them hesitates. Kenard waits for force. When it fails to arrive, he takes control of the exchange. Michael steps forward and beats him brutally. Kenard loses the fight immediately. He is still a very small child challenging boys several years older than him. Naaman backs away from the package in horror. Michael tells him to retrieve it, and Naaman says he does not want it. The beating proves Michael's capacity for the corner and proves Naaman lacks the same capacity. It gives Kenard a lesson too. Naaman's words had no power. Michael's fists settled the matter. The conclusion available to Kenard has nothing to do with honesty, loyalty, or ownership. Authority belongs to the person prepared to cause pain. This is one of the ugliest features of his story. The punishment works in the immediate sense. Kenard stole, Michael beat him, and the package returned. Everybody around the scene can treat that as a solved problem. The method strengthens every belief that will make Kenard more dangerous. Deception was a reasonable gamble. Weakness invited theft. Violence restored order. The next time Kenard wants control, he needs a better weapon. By the Season 4 finale, he is working on Michael's corner. Michael has beaten him and later employs him. The street has no permanent category for victim. The same boy can be disciplined, recruited, and placed back into service by the person who hurt him. The beating leaves Kenard inside the game, serving beneath a boss whose authority he believes. Prez sees Dookie near the corner and watches from a distance. Kenard approaches the former teacher and tries to sell him drugs. The interaction captures how completely the street economy has reorganized the child's view of adults. Prez sees a student he once taught and worries about where the boy is heading. Kenard sees an unfamiliar grown man lingering near a drug corner and identifies a possible customer. The school and the corner are sharing the same pavement. Their relationship with children works very differently. The school waits for Kenard to enter a building, sit in a room, and become part of an attendance count. The corner brings work to the place where he already stands. It offers money, rank, immediate feedback, and a role he understands. Baltimore keeps funding one system badly while allowing the other to recruit in public. Season 4 spends most of its attention on 4 boys, because each one lets us see an institutional path in detail. Namond enters Bunny Colvin's special class and eventually receives a home. Randy trusts school and police officials, loses Miss Anna, and ends up in a group home. Michael turns to Chris when legitimate adults fail to make him feel safe. Dookie receives temporary care from Prez and is pushed forward when school policy says the relationship has reached its end. Kenard exists below even that level of attention. He is younger than the boys at Tilghman, and the series never shows an institution making a serious attempt to know him. He receives no Colvin, no Prez, no Cuddy, and no Carver trying to place him somewhere safer. Any help he may have received remains too weak to enter his visible story. When Season 5 begins, Kenard is still working the corner under Michael's organization. The names above him have changed. Barksdale territory became Marlowe territory. Bodie died. Michael moved upward. The job available to Kenard remains almost identical. He continues using his size as an advantage and his mouth as a weapon. Police chase him while older dealers enjoy the distraction. He taunts Dookie for spending time in Michael's apartment with Bug instead of working outside. Dookie has begun to lose his place in the crew, and Kenard detects the weakness immediately. Dookie finally punches him. For a moment, Kenard receives the same answer Michael once gave him. Spider intervenes and beats Dookie. Kenard now benefits from the corner hierarchy. He can provoke someone physically larger because another older boy stands nearby to enforce the group's order. The exchange has no adult authority, rulebook, or meaningful appeal. Dookie wants dignity. Kenard wants to expose him. Spider decides whose side carries more weight. The result belongs to whoever can gather more force. Michael later explains guns to Dookie with more care than any adult has explained them to Kenard. A gun is a tool. Carrying one makes other people test you. Pulling it means being willing to go all the way. Michael sees Dookie clearly enough to tell him he has other skills. He refuses to solve Dookie's vulnerability by turning him into a shooter. Kenard has no equivalent conversation in the story. He learns the meaning of a gun from the results it produces. Omar returns to Baltimore after Marlowe's people torture and kill Butchie. Chris, Snoop, and Michael ambush him in an apartment. Omar survives by jumping from a balcony and badly injures his leg. He begins moving through West Baltimore on a makeshift crutch, robbing Marlowe's corners, destroying drugs, and calling Marlowe into the street. One of those corners belongs to the crew around Kenard. Everyone reacts to Omar's reputation. They drop what he orders them to drop. They count out the stash while he controls the scene. Kenard looks at the injured man and asks, "That's Omar?" He calls him Gimpy as a motherfucker. The line completes a change that began beside the Season 3 stash house. Kenard once fought for his turn to wear Omar's coat. He finally sees the man inside the costume and feels disappointed. The neighborhood legend is limping. The shotgun still controls the corner, yet the body holding it appears vulnerable. Kenard's instinct has always been to test the space between a reputation and the force behind it. He did it with Namond, he did it with police, he did it with Dookie. Omar becomes the largest version of the same opportunity. Shortly afterward, Kenard appears in an alley with several boys preparing to burn a cat. They have lighter fluid. The animal is helpless. The other boys participate, and Kenard seems to control the act. Omar approaches. The children run. Kenard stays and watches him pass. The cat matters because it removes every comforting explanation for Kenard's violence. There is no corner order, stolen package, insult, or economic reward. Hurting the animal offers control over something weaker. The scene tells us that the system analysis cannot become an excuse that erases his personality. Plenty of children live in the same neighborhood without trying to burn cats. Michael has killed people and still responds protectively to Bug. Dookie has been neglected and remains gentle. Randy suffers terribly and does not turn his pain toward animals. Kenard is unusually cruel. A diagnosis would exceed the evidence provided by a few scenes. His cruelty still has to be taken seriously. Baltimore built the setting in which Kenard's worst instincts could become useful without inventing those instincts for him. The corner gives aggression a job. Older boys reward contempt for weakness. Police teach him that his age can shield him from attention. Neighborhood legends show him how fear creates a name. A gun allows a tiny body to reverse every physical disadvantage in 1 second. Kenard follows Omar. Omar enters a Korean-owned store and asks for a soft pack of Newport cigarettes. The bell sounds behind him. He looks back, sees Kenard, and returns his attention to the counter. Kenard shoots him in the head. Omar survives armed crews because adults approaching him carry information. Their posture, movement, and reputation give him something to read. Kenard reaches him by appearing harmless. Omar's old rule places children beyond the immediate threat. The city has already moved those children into the game. Kenard drops the pistol after the shot. His face changes and he runs. That reaction is the last visible piece of childhood the series gives him. He could imagine pulling the trigger. The reality still shocks him once Omar falls. I think that moment matters because it keeps Kenard from becoming a miniature Chris Partlow. Chris understands murder as work. He prepares, controls the scene, and leaves with the body handled. Kenard acts with a child's compressed understanding of consequence. He sees vulnerability, gets a weapon, follows the target, and goes all the way. The emotional size of the act arrives after the bullet. The street begins changing the story almost immediately. In the next episode, one boy insists Kenard killed Omar and says homicide detectives have visited his home 3 times looking for him. Another refuses to believe it. His version gives the killing to boys from Pimlico carrying 3 assault rifles. Kenard accomplishes the act that should make his name enormous, and the neighborhood edits him out. Omar's legend is too large to end with one little boy and 1 handgun. The truth cannot satisfy the story people want to tell. By the finale, Omar's death has grown into an impossible battle against several armed men. This is the final failure of the education Kenard received from Reputation. He may have believed killing Omar would give him Omar's status. The show never confirms his motive, so that remains an interpretation. We can still see the outcome. Omar becomes more famous. Kenard becomes a rumor that people reject because he is too small for the legend. The arrest arrives during the final montage. Detective Crutchfield leads Kenard away in handcuffs. The officers around him look enormous. The child who was once not even bait finally fits the purpose of the justice system. That image completes his story with brutal precision. Police had physical contact with Kenard years earlier. He was too young to justify juvenile booking and too unimportant to generate a useful case. After Omar dies, homicide detectives visit his home repeatedly. The system becomes persistent once it has a murder to clear. We do not learn his sentence or what happens inside the juvenile system. The Wire stops at the point where Kenard becomes a process body. Earlier intervention would have required someone to see danger before it produced a statistic. Arrest only requires a suspect after the body appears. So what did the system do to Kenard? It made the drug corner the most consistent institution in his visible life. The corner knew what to do with his size. It made him less suspicious to police and useful for low-level work. It knew what to do with his aggression. It let him challenge other boys, sell drugs, and enforce a hierarchy. It knew what to do with his desire for recognition. It gave him famous men to imitate and smaller people to dominate. The legal institutions encountered him in fragments. Patrol officers saw a child who was not worth booking. Homicide eventually saw a suspect. The school system remains almost completely absent from his story. Social services never appear. No program connects all the warning signs because each warning belongs to a different moment, and most of those moments happen in public where adults have learned to keep moving. The adults inside the game also fail him in specific ways. Naymond employs him. Delonda demands that he be hurt. Michael beats him and later places him back on a corner. Marlowe's organization creates a city where murder is a routine answer to disrespect. Omar supplies the legend Kenard first imitates. None of these people wakes up intending to create the child who kills Omar. Together, they produce a world where Kenard's development makes sense. Bunk gives us the standard the neighborhood lost. The hard men of his youth recognized a schoolboy and pushed him toward home. Kenard grows up around men who use schoolboys because youth is operationally useful. The decline Bunk describes has less to do with nostalgia for nicer criminals. It concerns the disappearance of adults willing to tell a child that some rooms should remain closed to him. Nauman proves that a different result requires personal intervention. Bunny does more than offer advice. He learns the boy, challenges Delonda, speaks to Weebay, and brings Naymond into his home. Weebay uses his remaining authority to release his son. Several adults take risks that their institutions never required them to take. Kenard receives the ordinary outcome because nobody makes that extraordinary commitment. Even that conclusion needs one final limit: a better school, attentive officer, or stable adult might have changed him. The series gives us no alternate Kenard, so certainty would be dishonest. His cruelty appears early and goes further than the behavior of most boys around him. The system increases his access to violence, rewards his tests of weakness, and waits too long to respond. Kenard still chooses to steal, torment, and kill. That combination makes him more disturbing than a child presented as entirely innocent. The Wire is interested in systems because systems shape the choices people encounter. It never claims every person will make the same choice. Michael questions orders, Dookie looks for shelter, Randy bargains, Naman performs hardness and collapses when asked to live it. Kenard sees weakness and moves toward it. Baltimore takes that instinct and gives it a professional language. His story begins with children converting a dead woman and a gunfight into play. It continues through a corner run by boys, a police department unwilling to spend time booking him, a beating accepted as discipline, and a criminal organization that always has work for another child. By the time he follows Omar into the store, every institution around him has taught some part of the act. The legend supplies the target. The corner supplies the logic. The gun supplies the power. The city supplies the opportunity to disappear until the shot is fired. Kenard kills one of the most feared men in Baltimore and gains nothing visible from it. Omar becomes a larger legend. The corner keeps operating. Police close around the smallest person involved. The system finds its first meaningful role for him at the very end, once it knows exactly where to place him. That is the story of Kenard. He begins as a child rehearsing violence that belongs to adults. He becomes useful to those adults before he is old enough to understand the life they have handed him. When the performance turns into a real killing, Baltimore responds at the point it understands best. It puts him in handcuffs.